The photographs are a means of making real, or more real, matters that the privileged and the merely safe might prefer to ignore. So I don't know about anybody else, but March was a little bit of a difficult month for me. I think the war on Iran really just made me feel very frustrated and disenchanted and disillusioned with life. You know, you turn on news stations like Al Jazeera, they talk about the fuel shortages in places like Pakistan, people having to walk to work because they can't afford to drive. And it's all because of these evil, corrupt leaders. And it just made me feel very frustrated and very sad that this is the world that we live in. And at the same time as that was all going on, I also had just read the memoir by one of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, Virginia Giuffre, and I just felt very frustrated and disillusioned with the world as a whole. Having those two things at the top of my mind, it was really difficult for me to get out of bed and work, honestly, because I just felt very sad about the world that we live in. For me, reading Ecclesiastes was really helpful because it talks about how there's so much death and destruction in the world and how there's so much evil and how it seems like the evil are the ones that are winning in this life. But, one has to just make the most of it and find the joy in the day-to-day. And then it also talks about the meaning of life is to fear God and to follow God. That's my take on what Ecclesiastes means. Other people may differ. So reading that and trying to live my life in that way has made the month be a little bit better. I did want to quickly just chat about ways in which I've been able to get back into reading despite having what I would consider to be a very busy work schedule. You should think about reading in terms of complexity. So if you haven't been reading for a while, definitely don't pick up a really complicated text. Like one of the books I want to get through this year, it's really two books, but the first one is The Origins of Political Order by Francis Fukuyama. I picked this up at the beginning of the year and I put it down because I was like, oh, this is a little bit too complex for where I'm at right now. And I think I'm finally ready to maybe pick it up this month. So I like to think of books in sort of tiers. So you have nonfiction and then you have fiction. If you're interested in nonfiction, I would say a really easy place to start is with memoirs or autobiographies. So those are the books that I kind of consider to be my easy reads, almost like a warm-up before I get into the more challenging works of nonfiction. And those sorts of books, I like to listen to them as an audiobook. And I'll do that as I'm doing my chores, like doing my dishes, meal prepping, doing laundry, ironing. That's when I'll listen to those sort of memoirs because you really don't need to be paying attention to every single thing. You just need to get the overall gist of the story. And then once you've gotten into sort of just listening to books, I think then you can tackle slightly more challenging ones. And you'll see if you do listen to audiobooks, some nonfiction books you can listen to and others you can't. The Fukuyama book I mentioned, I have tried listening to it as an audiobook, but it's a little bit challenging and I feel like I can only do certain things while I'm listening to this because I really need to have it close to be able to take notes. I'm currently reading Regarding the Pain of Others by Susan Sontag, and this is an excellent book to physically read and to not listen to as an audiobook. It's very short chapters, but the sentences are quite complicated, so I think it would be a little bit too difficult to just listen to. And one thing I like to say often is if you are reading a nonfiction book that's a little bit challenging and you're listening to it as an audiobook, then I would recommend also having either a physical book or the ebook to go along with it so that you can kind of follow what's happening and maybe highlight the important points. And then when it comes to fiction, I would say if you haven't really read fiction in a while, don't pick up War and Peace by Tolstoy. You're not going to finish it. It's you need to start with things that are a bit easier. So if I've been a bit rusty with fiction, I'll pick up a nice short work of fiction. Fiction, I typically listen to it as an audiobook. So if I have been in a bit of a rough spell with fiction, which I would say I haven't read a fiction book in a while until last month, until March, I purposely picked up a fiction book that was really short. It was 3 hours long and I just listened to it. So start with a book that's really short that you can probably finish in an afternoon, and then you'll feel really accomplished for getting through it, and it might make you want to pick up more pieces like that or more books like that And I would also say start with contemporary books. Don't start with a classic. And once you've been able to get through a few more modern books, then maybe challenge yourself with a short novella that's a classic. So those are sort of tips and tricks that I would give in terms of reading, because I know it's really hard to find time to do it. If you're really, really busy, audiobooks are definitely the way to go because you can multitask as you're doing it. I also wanted to just quickly talk about the war in Iran because I think it's really difficult to know where to get your information from. Twitter used to be my main place to get information. Elon Musk has just completely destroyed that platform and there's so much misinformation, it's not even funny. Places that I try to go to get a bit more of a nuanced take. I think, the major news outlets are not terrible. I don't really watch a lot of American news because I just think it's not very good personally. MSNBC and Fox are like completely useless, but you could watch CNN. I just don't really think that's a good use of your time. Like if you don't have a lot of time, I wouldn't recommend just putting on CNN because you're not really going to get a very nuanced take. I've been finding podcasts actually to be the most beneficial if you are really short on time and want to understand what's going on. I've really been enjoying the Financial Times podcast because they are really tackling the war in Iran from like a financial viewpoint. There's one that I listened to a few days ago and they were interviewing someone who was an economic historian and he specifically studies economic warfare. So the use of things like sanctions, blockades in times of war. So it was a really interesting conversation and I definitely want to check out his book, which deals with the subject in much greater detail. Al Jazeera can be good. And typically if I do want to sit and watch the news for let's say an hour, that would probably be the channel I would watch. You can get it for free on YouTube. I don't love all of their podcasts, but I do think the Listening Post is pretty good. And I had started listening today to one of their podcasts on that. And they were talking about sort of propaganda during the war and the way in which Israeli reporters are not able to really talk about things in a lot of detail and talk about the consequences of some of what's happening. So that's like one podcast that I would recommend that's on YouTube. I also have been listening to the Chris Hedges podcast. His have actually been quite good. Recently, he was interviewing someone from the military who had a lot of firsthand experience of warfare, and he was giving really interesting information, like talking about the sort of tanks they're using and missiles. So I thought that was quite a good look into things. And I think also history is really helpful. So one of my favorite places to listen to documentaries or watch documentaries is PBS Frontline. So today I was listening to a really old documentary they have about the Gulf War. I also want to understand and learn more about the Iran-Iraq war, so I'm also looking for documentaries on that. I also would recommend about that, I've talked about that on my channel before, actually a Canadian resource, but they do really good short 15-20 minute videos. A few other podcasts that I think are pretty good if you want to just follow politics in general or follow the media in general are Citations Needed and Canada Land. That's a very Canada focused podcast. Okay, that's it. So I've been on the hunt for a good wool blazer. The current blazer I've been wearing a lot has been this one I got from Banana Republic. It was a pretty cheap set and it was just something that I felt like I could wear all the time to court and not have to worry about it because it was machine washable. But now I've been looking to elevate my everyday black blazer, and I really was looking for something that was as close to 100% wool as possible without breaking the bank. So I had my eye on this one from Aritzia for a while. It's $248 plus tax. This is a size 2. I typically wear a size 0 or 2, but obviously for a blazer you want to be able to button it, so I went for something a little bit bigger. I like that it has pockets. It also has a little pocket here, and I think the sleeve length is okay. I don't think I need to rush and get that tailored or altered. And then I have been on the hunt for good, affordable white t-shirts. My go-to from the high street has always been the Uniqlo ones, but they're $19.99 I think, and I'm looking to buy a few white shirts. Plus with white shirts I always get stains on them. So I picked up this one honestly from Walmart. I think it was $7. So we'll see how it holds up in comparison to my regular Uniqlo. And then I'm just wearing both of these with these blue jeans I got from Quince. I kind of regret the length I got. They're almost 3/4, but I think it will be nice for the summertime. So just wanted to quickly pop in and show a few of the new pieces I got this week. These are the only new clothing pieces I picked up. I just wanted to come and chat about a few books that I have been reading. And I picked up these two books by Susan Sontag. The first is Regarding the Pain of Others, and the second is On Women. One of the distinguishing features of modern life is that it supplies countless opportunities for regarding, at a distance, through the medium of photography, horrors taking place throughout the world. But are viewers inured or incited to violence by these images of cruelty? Are our perceptions of reality eroded by the daily barrage of such images? What does it mean to care about the suffering of others far away? I just feel like ever since the genocide in Gaza, we've been bombarded with images of suffering and of pain. And sometimes I worry I'm not really sure how to process this information properly. So that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to give this book a read. Some of the questions that have been raised by reading this book include: who is the intended audience for these pictures of war? War shows atrocities. This makes people feel very disgusted. However, Sontag also questions whether this is the only purpose of pictures. She talks about the idea that war can actually create greater militancy from people who see these pictures, see this atrocity, and want to join in the fight against the evil other. She also looks at people who believe that war or violence is never justified, and she critiques this argument, saying that violence can exalt someone subjected to it into a martyr or a hero. I don't know about you, but I think all of these ideas are really fascinating, very interesting to explore. I will say it's written in very difficult to understand language. Like that first chapter I've read multiple times, and I essentially had like a mini book study with the person who had mentioned this book just to get a better understanding of the first chapter. So I'm reading it very slowly. I'm kind of taking one chapter every like Sunday afternoon and spending a few hours reading and understanding it. I honestly have been like sitting there with my dictionary and looking up the meaning of words just to make sure I'm really understanding the specific sentence. So not an easy read, but definitely a good one. I decided to pick up On Women by Sontag because I have been looking for a book on feminism. I had started reading The Second Sex by de Beauvoir, which is really good, but I was looking for something a little bit more modern day and contemporary. This is a collection of essays. Sometimes it is more of like a question and answer, but overall I would just refer to them as essays. And so far they seem to have all been written in the 70s. Okay, my battery died, but we have recharged and we're back. So one of the questions that was raised in this book that I've really been meditating on was, do you consider the family as an obstacle for the liberation of women? Sontag critiques the nuclear family. The modern nuclear family is a psychological and moral disaster. It is a prison of sexual repression, a playing field of inconsistent moral laxity, a museum of possessiveness, a guilt-producing factory, and a school of selfishness. Yet, despite the frightful price its members pay in anxiety and a backlog of murderous feelings, the modern family does allow some positive experiences, particularly in capitalist society today, as Juliet Mitchell has pointed out. The family is often the only place where something approximating unalienated personal relations of warmth, trust, dialogue, uncompetitiveness, loyalty, spontaneity, sexual pleasure, fun are still permitted. One of the things that I think is very important when it comes to the idea of deciding to have a family, deciding to have children, is making sure that you are, as a woman, choosing somebody who understands that it's not just a woman's role to deal with things such as chores and childbearing. Sontag mentions this idea in this chapter, saying, democratizing family tasks is one of the steps necessary to change the oppressive definitions of the role of wife and husband, mother and father. It will also help break down the walls constructed in all modern industrial societies that separate one tiny family from another, thereby putting such devastating psychological strains on the members of each family. One of the major takeaways from that chapter is the importance of having a community, not relying on the nuclear family, which is the way in which most families live, but making sure you have additional supports outside of that, and also making sure that you and your partner both understand the roles in which you are going to participate in your relationship. If both parties are working, both parties are also participating in family tasks. It's not just on the woman to do it all. Overall, I'm really liking this book. I find this easier to read than Regarding the Pain of Others. The essays were written much earlier in her career, whereas Regarding the Pain of Others was the last book she wrote before she died. And I think also just the fact that they are numerous essays, they're a little bit more self-contained, rather than Regarding the Pain of Others, which is one overall idea which she then expands on throughout the book. Overall, I've really been enjoying these two books, which is good. It's been a while since I've picked up nonfiction books that are really challenging and also are written in a very beautiful way. So I will be coming back and talking about them more as I read more of these books. So today's been a busy day. I finished putting together this dresser behind me. I got it yesterday and I was reading the reviews, and this lady on Walmart is like, oh, it took my husband 2 hours to put together. So I thought I'd be able to get it basically done yesterday evening, but when it was like 11 p.m., I was like, I'm gonna go to bed and finish it in the morning. So I finished this morning. I was able to put this together on my own. Fortunately, no husband around to put this together for me. And then after that, I went and got some groceries, just did the regular stuff. I was supposed to be off this weekend, like on vacation in Bali in Southeast Asia, but I ended up deciding not to do that. My mom just was having a lot of complications with her treatment, and my firm also is still in the early stages, so I just didn't really feel like I could step away for 2 weeks and go away on vacation. So I'm just doing a bit of a staycation, although I do have some court dates mixed in, but days that I don't have deadlines or court, I'm just trying as much as possible to not think about work and relax and enjoy myself. So I just finished washing, blow drying, and straightening my hair. It took a very long time. I am going to chop these extensions. They're very stringy towards the end, and I want to play around with having more of a bob style. So I actually think it looks so much better than this side did. This is the thing I noticed about these extensions. They just feel like they're not as thick at the bottom as they are at the top. Okay, so now I have to do the same thing on the other side. What do we think? I actually like it so much more. I knew I was gonna like it a lot more. I don't know why I was just really nervous to do it. I might keep it at this length though, because I do like that style where you do you flip the ends. And so I think to do a style like that, I probably need to leave a teeny bit of length to allow myself to do that. I might actually do that today. We'll see. I've been seeing a lot of content online about women in their 30s who are single and what that life is like. I'm not sure if I would say this is where I saw myself being at this age, but I also am not necessarily surprised I'm here. I have spent a lot of my time focusing on my career. I wanted to become a lawyer. I wanted to work at the best firm possible in Toronto. And so I just have really set very aspirational goals for myself for my career. And I have to say I haven't put the same level of effort or time into dating and meeting people. So I want to try and record as much of this as possible. I used to be really big on journaling, but I haven't done that in a while, and I think it's because I just like the idea of having a visual diary a little bit more. The last few weeks, my focus has really been on my hair. The thing with all of these is you have to be comfortable with not looking your best at the beginning. If it's something that's new to you, it's going to take some time to really figure out, the things that suit you and that look good on you. So I think I'm getting a little bit better with my hair and figuring out styles that work for me and that last. And so the next thing I'm going to be working on is makeup. It is the Sephora sale, so I hope to pick up a few goodies and just in general work on my physical appearance in that way. I might even go back to using contacts. And also I am quite excited to start dating again with this new confident version of myself. I feel like for so much of my time dating, it's been very much hoping the other person will like me and wanting to be a people pleaser. But now I feel so much more confident in the person that I am and what I'm looking for and what I'm not looking for. And honestly, I do think Toronto is the best city in Canada when it comes to dating. So in March, I got through 4 books, 3 works of nonfiction and 1 work of fiction. So starting with the work of fiction, I read Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico, and this was nominated for the Booker Prize either last year or a few years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. And this book follows this couple who are expats. They move to Berlin and they essentially work in sort of freelance graphic design work, and so they're able to work from anywhere in the world. They live very much an ideal life in a really nice apartment with beautiful furniture. Because their work is freelance, they have the opportunity to travel all the time, but they're very much filled with this feeling of emptiness, of unfulfillment, unhappiness, despite the beautiful pictures that they post on Instagram. It feels very much like a critique of our current society, of social media, and of this general feeling of emptiness and existentialist dread that most people feel, no matter whether they are struggling or if they are doing well financially. Overall, I thought it was an okay book, good exploration of the topic, very timely. I wouldn't say it was particularly groundbreaking, but if you are new to the realm of existentialist texts, it could be a good one to start with because it's very, very sort of familiar because it's placed in the modern day. Outside of that, I read a lot of nonfiction. So I read 2 memoirs. The first was Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, and this is by one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, Virginia Giuffre, who unfortunately did end her life last year. I talked a little bit about this in my last video, so I'm not going to get into too much detail, but it was a very, very difficult read. I think it's important to read books like that, but just go into it knowing that this woman experienced extreme trauma even before meeting Ghislaine and Epstein. And it sort of gives you an idea of the sorts of young girls that Ghislaine was targeting. Young girls who were very disconnected from their family, young girls who had experienced a lot of trauma, young girls who had been victims of sexual abuse. And so the idea of making a good amount of money for sex didn't always seem like a terrible trade-off for some of these girls because they'd had that sort of thing happen to them without their consent and without any sort of financial contribution. So even just people who might be wondering, how does a young girl get involved with people like this? It gives you a better indication of the sorts of people that they were targeting, and then also gives you a very inside look into what was going on with Epstein, how they were recruiting girls, what sorts of atrocities were happening to these young girls on the island, or outside of that, the way in which Epstein was giving these young girls to other people in positions of power. So it was very insightful, but definitely very challenging to read. But overall, I think it is a good one to read, to remember that these victims are human beings. I also read Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Things, which is by Matthew Perry, who also unfortunately is no longer with us. This really does a good job of opening your eyes into what it is like to be somebody who suffers from substance use disorder. Perry started with drinking alcohol and then quickly graduated to other things, and he always made this joke that he never got as far as heroin, but he very much used a lot of substances, particularly opioids. And towards the end of the book, he sort of talks about the fact that the reason he gave up using these substances is he just required so much, such a high quantity, just to get a sense of a high. And because of that, he often was lying and saying that he had a lot of pain to doctors so that he could get hooked up to IVs, because that was the only way he could really feel a high. And then also the really intensive destruction that all of the alcohol and drugs was doing to his body. It was also, I would say, quite a horrifying read. And for people who think like, oh, why don't people who use these substances just stop? Very much shows you that it's out of their hands. You know, it is a disorder, it's a disease. Obviously, rest in peace to both Virginia and Matthew, because unfortunately they are no longer with us. The last book I read in March, this was actually my first read of the month, was The Big Short, Inside the Doomsday Machine. I also spoke about this in my last video, so I'm not going to get into too much detail, but I would say if you're interested in the 2008 financial crash, you should probably watch the movie of this. I don't think the book was as helpful, just because it was quite complicated, and the way in which it's told is, it's not really just following the financial crisis, it's more following the crisis from different people's perspectives, and they are essentially within the financial industry. So it's a very unique lens looking into the crisis, but I think you do have to have quite a bit of background knowledge about what caused the crisis in order to actually understand this book. The movie does a bit of a better job helping to explain it to people who might not have that background knowledge. And then I also think the way in which the story is told from different people's perspectives is much easier to follow that along in a movie, because you have particular characters like, oh, that's Steve Carell, oh, this is Christian Bale. Whereas if you're reading it as a book, it's much harder to really follow the stories in the same way. But overall, I thought it was really insightful look into what causes financial crashes, at least the 2008 financial crash. And I'm really trying to learn a lot more about investing and finances. And obviously, if you are getting into investing, you want to make sure you're not putting it into things that are inevitably going to go out of business or going to fail. I think the biggest thing I took away from it is to not just follow what people are saying, to really make sure you're doing your research and understanding things. And if a certain financial instrument seems overly complicated, just don't bother getting into it, because the chances are that other people who are, you know, assessing the risk of this instrument, they might not even understand it themselves. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, this channel is all about re-education and decolonizing the mind. I am currently on a journey of re-education and decolonizing my own mind, and I created this channel as a way to share what I am reading and learning with the world. If you want to follow along with me on this journey, feel free to subscribe.